Welcome to the Hemlock State Explorer. It's a rainy day in Berks County outside of Morgantown, but we're not going to let that stop us because we are at a very special place today, Joanna Furnace. Joanna Furnace is special because it's a well-preserved iron plantation really in the heart of what was iron country. It's administered by the Hay Creek Historical Association, and you can see the furnace and the associated buildings very well preserved. And let's start off our tour here at this marker. It tells us a little something about Joanna Furnace. It says it was named in honor of Joanna Holland Potts, the daughter of Philadelphia merchant and wife of Samuel Potts. Joanna Furnace was established in 1791 by Joanna's husband Samuel in partnership with Thomas Rudder III, Thomas May, and Thomas Bull. The 18th and 19th century iron-making community was in operation from 1791 to 1898 and passed through several individual partnership hands, including John Smith, Thomas Bull Smith, William Darling, Levi Bull Smith, and L. Heber Smith. The furnace finally blew out in 1898 after the ironmaster L. Heber Smith. So there you hear some big names in local history here. The ironmasters, they were like iron aristocrats, if you will, and often their families intermarried. We heard of the Pottses, after which Pottstown is named, the Rudders, the Bulls, the Smiths. So those were all big iron families. I believe there was also relation to the Grubb family of Cornwall iron furnace. But at any rate, let's take our tour around the grounds. And I'm really excited because it's beautiful here. Hay Creek Historical Association does a great job preserving and administering. I'm excited to be here, so let's get exploring. As we're walking towards the furnace and casting house, I want to ask you to please help us out by liking, subscribing to the channel, and sharing. And you can check out all of our adventures on this YouTube channel and at hemlockstateexplorer.com. So the large building you see in front of you with the stack on top, that would have been the furnace, and the casting house connected to it. Up behind is the storage shed where the charcoal and iron ore and limestone would have been stored. And then this house here is the blowing engine house. So this furnace was initially water powered, and then later on the blowers, the bellows to supply air for the blast were later replaced by steam engines that provided more power. So this is actually the engine house, would have been built later on. Let's see if we can look inside. Looks like they have some kind of exhibit in there. Take a look around back. Again, this is very well preserved. We have another very well preserved iron furnace literally up the road, Hopewell Furnace. So be on the lookout for that in future adventures. Okay, let's take a closer look. Unfortunately, they have it roped off, so we can't go inside and see the furnace itself. But here's what we can see. This was a charcoal blast furnace. You can see inside there. And then this in here, can't see in too well, would have been the casting house where the iron ingots came out, the pigs, and then would have been cast into, melted, and then cast into molds. There you go, here's the casting house. Let's see what this sign says. The ore roaster. The ore roaster was added in the fall of 1888 to help reduce the sulfur content of lower grade ore. This processed ore greatly reduced the smelting time when placed in the furnace. The end result was better quality iron. Charged with alternative layers of charcoal iron ore, the ore roaster was fired for 24 hours. At the end of the roasting, the ore was removed from the bottom of the ore roaster. The clay-lined ore roaster was 10 feet, 8 inches in diameter. So that's the ore roaster. And now a bit of information about the furnace stack which you see before you. Built in 1791 with native sandstone to a height of 28 feet, and beautiful I might add. The furnace stack stands today at 45 feet high and was constructed wide at the bottom and narrow at the top like a pyramid, and was reinforced with iron girders. To make iron production easier, the furnace stack was erected on the side of a hill, so iron ore limestone for flux and charcoal for fuel could be easily dumped into the top of the furnace. The inner fire brick part of the furnace stack, known as the Bosch, resembles an inverted cone and was the smelting chamber holding the molten iron. The Bosch consists of 3 definitive sections: hearth or base, corbelled or lower Bosch, and upper Bosch. The molten iron was tapped from the hearth at the bottom of the stack. To make iron, the Bosch was first filled with charcoal and lit from the top. Then, when the fire burned down to the archway near the bottom of the stack, the furnace was refilled with charcoal and the fire worked back to the top. A blast of cold air was then applied through the tuyeres. Next, a charge of charcoal, iron ore, and limestone was put from the tunnel head in increasing quantities. This air blast was obtained by water-powered bellows activated by a giant water wheel. It took several days before the slag and molten iron produced from this process flowed into the hearth below. The furnace was charged every half hour with the 3 ingredients, and molten iron was tapped every 12 hours. And let's read about the casting house. The casting house is the stone building constructed to the right of the furnace stack. Due to the extreme heat in this building, the walls were constructed with castellations, openings. The openings allowed hot air to vent to the outside and cooler exterior air to flow in. The orange clay beaver tail tile roof also safeguarded the building from heat and protected it from sparks emitted by the furnace. The day-to-day operation required 2 founders, that is supervisors, to regulate the furnace. In addition, 2 keepers, 2 guttermen, 2 or 3 fillers, molders, and several other laborers. These people worked day and night in 12-hour shifts every day while the furnace was in blast, from 9 to 13 months. These skilled workers were English, Welsh, Irish, and German, and African Americans. Usually twice a day, the molten iron was tapped from the Bosch and was channeled or ladled into impressions of blackened sand in the floor of the casting house to produce pig iron, floor castings, and flask castings. In 1840, Joanna Furnace produced 2,200 tons of pig iron and 500 tons of castings. As you take in the engine house, let me read to you about it. The mid-19th century style building with its Gothic windows housed a Weimer model 1889 steam engine to help power the furnace. This new hot blast method of producing superheated air replaced the giant water wheel that had been turned by water running through the head race to operate the blast machinery. Instead, hot gases were trapped from the stack and channeled through a downcomer pipe to a boiler behind the blowing engine house, producing steam for the engine and providing heat to create the hot blast. Invented in 1829, the hot blast method of smelting iron superheated the blast air before it entered the furnace. This method retained much more heat than had been possible in a cold blast method, reducing the amount of charcoal needed and doubling the production of iron. Joanna Furnace, during its short hot blast period, 1888 to 1898, did not switch to coal or coke for its fuel. It continued to use charcoal throughout its 107 years of operation. Now, something amazing is at one time this was high tech, and this was really like a factory, and this speaks to the wealth and attitude of the families, that even a building like this, which would have essentially been a factory building, they made beautiful. You look at how pleasing it is to the eye architecturally. You look at the colors, the Gothic arches, the care of the stonework for a factory building. So this is something that just is really amazing. And you see this at Cornwall Iron Furnace, you see this at Hopewell Furnace as well. It's just looks beautiful, and I really commend the Hay Creek Historical Association for preserving it so well. So let's head up here to the top of the furnace and see what's up here. We're behind the furnace stack and the casting house, and if we swivel to the right, here's the storage shed. Looks more like a barn, and just look at those huge buttresses holding up the wall. This is where the raw materials, the charcoal and the iron ore and the limestone would have been housed. And so you see that workers would have brought the materials out of that door across the ramp and then deposited the materials into the furnace stack. So let's explore more of the grounds. I love that stone fence there. I wonder if the Iron Master's house would have been in that area over there. We'll take a walk and explore that. There's probably an interpretive sign. So I've been reading to you from these interpretive signs, and they're just great. I love the information. I love the history. You may or may not know, if you've watched any of my other videos, you would know that Pennsylvania was at one time, in the colonial days and afterwards, the iron capital of not just the nation, but of the world. And we're really in the heart of iron country right here, the early iron period, and then later on it spread to western Pennsylvania in the early 1800s. We were actually just out in Clarion County, which I think had 31 iron furnaces in operation up to the mid 1800s. So check out some of our stories there. But this would have been the company store, I believe. Let's take a walk around. And again, I just want to draw your attention to the beautiful local stone and even the gingerbread trim at the top. Again, this was a company town. People worked here, they lived here, and it wasn't just people who worked on the iron furnace, but everything from farmers to teamsters to really anything that you would need to have a business running, and not just that, a town. So here we're at the office. So this is the office in the company store, and if I recall correctly, the Iron Master or one of the managers of the iron plantation would even stand at that balcony at the top and address the workers and give assignments and disseminate plans and information from there. So this was a social center as well as an office and a grocery store. Really beautiful. But as I was saying, these iron plantations employed more than just the workers, but really everyone related to that. The teamsters for hauling the materials, woodcutters for cutting the wood, colliers to convert the wood into charcoal, even the farmers to provide food, people to provide the livestock, and really anything that would require, or any profession or skill that would be required to run a town. These were entire towns built around the iron making enterprise, but it was by no means limited to iron making. After reading about the charcoal barn, I have to make a correction. This was used for the storage of charcoal, but not for iron ore and limestone. Just look at that beautiful stone structure. Think of all the work that would have gone into this, and really iron was vital to the birth and growth of the colonies and our nation. It was something required, for everything from cooking utensils to farming implements to tools and to cannons even for the nation's conflicts. But we're at the top of the hill here, and it's just a beautiful view down below. So we'll pass the office again and then check out what's down below behind that stone fence. We passed through the stone wall on the walkway you see before you, and behind that you can see the engine house and the casting house and furnace. And as we suspected, this was indeed the site of the ironmaster's house. Nothing remains except for a wall. But let's read. You can take a look at this while I read the interpretive sign. Constructed around 1792, the Joanna Furnace mansion was the home to the ironmaster and his family. Originally a federal-style home, the house was Victorianized in 1877 by the last ironmaster and his wife, L. Heber and Ella Jane Grubb Smith. So that's interesting. Let me just pause here and add commentary. The Grubb family is the family that ran Cornwall Iron Furnace up in Lebanon County. So yeah, like I thought, these were really like American iron aristocrats and had a lot of intermarrying between the families, for much of the reasons powerful families intermarry today to pass on the wealth and the influence in the family. It makes sense. But anyway, continuing on. According to the oral histories, the 25-room mansion had 28 fireplaces, often not centered in the rooms. There were highly polished wood floors, ceilings, and walls in a softly shaded maroon color. Wreath sculptures adorned the ceiling and walls in both the mansion's parlors. Wide windows were framed with velvet curtains with dangling bowls that matched the color of the wreath sculptures. There were Persian rugs in the large hallway, along with bronze sculptures and a grandfather clock. In the dining room, there was a large oak table and buffet. An oak desk and a floor-to-ceiling glass-enclosed bookcase finished the libraries. Bedroom fireplaces had marble mantels. Gas light, probably carbide, provided light for the house. Crystal lamps hung in the parlors and the dining rooms. So you're going to have to use your imagination as you listen to that description. It seems like a very beautiful place. Although you have to be aware, here's the ironmaster's mansion. Right there's the furnace, right? And these furnaces were charcoal furnaces, so there was continual smoke, the continual sound of work and animals. So yeah, it was luxurious, but I mean, you were just a couple yards, so to speak, from the center of all the activity. And I guess you would have to be, because this would have been a high responsibility leadership position of, at the time, a high-tech industry. As we continue, in addition to the ironmaster's family, staff included cooks and maids that lived in the mansion. During the summer months, guests from all over the world stayed there. At the death of L. Heber Smith in 1898 and his wife Ella Jane in 1920, the house still remained in the family for another 25 years. In 1945, the mansion was sold to William and Elizabeth Phelps, who were distantly related to the Smith family. After a short ownership by the Phelps family, Bethlehem Steel Corporation acquired the site, and by 1960 the mansion complex area sat vacant and overgrown. Due to safety and tax issues, Bethlehem Steel had the mansion, carriage house, and bank barn torn down. So there you go, the ironmaster's house at Joanna Furnace. So if you like history, and you like adventure, or if you're just curious, this is so cool. Even if you just like learning about the areas around us, the areas you live, places like this are a real treasure. And although we're just on a walking tour now, the Hay Creek Historical Association actually uses this property to put on a number of events. I think about 2 years ago, we visited here for their Victorian Christmas. And that was really cool because they had people working in the forge and in the casting house, giving lectures, and they were actually making things. I believe sleigh bells. It was a very, very interesting time. That you can tell the people loved doing what they were doing. They were a wealth of knowledge. They also had food. They had events. They had music. People were dressed in the Victorian era garb. It was just a really fun time. So I believe they have the Victorian Christmas every year. So if you have an opportunity and you're in the Morgantown area, I'd really encourage you to check out the Victorian Christmas that they put on here at Joanna Furnace Complex. And I think they also put on other festivals, particularly in the fall. I've never been there, but I've heard that there's an apple festival and a couple other festivals. The grounds are beautiful, but as we're coming over here by this low stone structure, I'm not sure what this building is, but if you see all these other outbuildings, that's what these outbuildings are for. It looks like a ticket booth here and other booths here. So these are here for the festivals. Let's take a turn down here and see what's up. So we're on the other side of that long, low stone structure, which turns out was the mule stable and office. And to our right, we have some buildings used for the various activities. A Conestoga wagon on display, a few other outbuildings. You see the stone retaining wall up top where the Ironmaster's mansion would have been. And I remember that concessions were being sold in these buildings. I remember having some very good soup here actually during the Victorian Christmas. But this is just such an interesting place, and I'm glad it's been preserved. Here's the replica blacksmith shop, and as we turn, there's the engine house and replica wheelwright shop. So I remember during the Victorian furnace, that's where folks were making the sleigh bells, using the old bellows and forge and anvil and just by hand making sleigh bells. And then in the wheelwright shop, there was a gentleman giving a very interesting historical talk, both of course dressed in the Victorian era wear or Victorian era wardrobe. Over here we're coming to some other buildings, a sawmill, and I remember this large barn is relatively new. And this was filled with various historical machines. It was fascinating to see because it used a central engine and then an axle running through the building with leather belts coming off of the axle to power all the machines. I remember there were at least a dozen machines, probably more, of all different types, but it was fascinating to see. So what do they call this? They call this the Mechanical Technology Building, Vintage Working Equipment. I can tell you from experience that this is worth seeing whenever it's open. So if you have the opportunity, check out the Hay Creek Historical Association's website and find out when their events are occurring and take a visit to Joanna Furnace. Thanks for joining us on another adventure with the Hemlock State Explorer at a historical treasure, Joanna Furnace. Very well preserved, beautiful structures, and tells the history of both this area and our nation. Please do us a favor, like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, please check out all of our adventures at hemlockstateexplorer.com. trailblazer.com. Until next time.